have a cutaway transmission here. So we're going to show you what happens in the transmission related to what you do when you move the gear shift lever in the bus. And we'll also tie together how you synchronize gears, find shift point matches, and that kind of thing. We have a graph on the board that we'll deal with in a minute, and I'll have you fill one out. But mainly right now I'm interested in you understanding how this transmission works.
All right.
Because it's important for you to understand that so you understand how to shift it and how to match the gear selections right and those kinds of things, okay?
All right.
Now, first of all, this is the part of the transmission that hooks to the back of the engine, right? And if you remember the movie that we looked at, we saw the movie The Powertrain, and it showed basically how a smaller transmission works. And you remember the U-joints and the drive line? Well, that hooks on right here and goes to the rear wheels, okay? Now, you'll notice that, well, I'll explain to you what the engine set of gears are first. Anytime the engine is running and the clutch is out, the gears you see turning here are turning with the engine. Now, correspondingly, we have a set of gears that are hooked to the back wheels. So when the back wheels turn, the engine or the back wheel gears turn. Okay? Now, the important part of this to understand is that in each gear position, first, second, third, and so forth, there's actually two gears that make up that gear position. So if I say to you, John, put it in first gear, what you're actually doing is taking two gears and putting them together, all right? So when we're in first, we're looking at this gear and this gear. When we're looking at second, we're looking at this gear and this gear. Looking at third, we're looking at this gear and this gear. These two right here. Looking at fourth, we're looking at these two right here. Fifth, we're looking at these two right here. And this is a miscellaneous gear that we won't deal with. And way back under there, if you look down under that shaft, is another gear, and that's reverse.
All right.
All right. Now, John, we'll show you how each gear connects and what that process is. Right here is called the shifting forks, which hook on to the gear shift lever. All right. So when you're moving the gear shift lever, you're moving these forks to make this thing do what it does. Right. Now we put it in first gear, and you let the clutch out and you start to accelerate. This is what's happening. So you get a lot of engine RPM, a lot of revolution on this shaft, very little on this shaft. So you need a lot of engine power and a very low gear ratio, or a gear with a lot of teeth on it, to get the weight moving. All right? So that's why you have that situation, but you're running very slow speed. Now, when we take it out of first gear and we connect second, you have a smaller gear, so the relationship between how fast the engine's turning and how fast the rear wheel's turning change. You see how much faster that turns?
Yes.
Okay. If we take it out of second and put it in third, then we go into another ratio, and the rear wheels will continue to turn faster. All right? Now look. See how much faster that's turning? Okay, now we'll put it fourth. Now we're getting up to highway speed. Okay. Now if we put it in fifth, now in a non-overdrive transmission, when you're in the highest gear that you have, you are running direct. And what that means is one revolution of the engine 1 revolution of the drive line,
Okay.
or the rear of the transmission. Okay, does that make some sense?
Yes.
All right, now what we have to learn at this point, once we understand basically how this works, is what we're going to do when we shift the bus. I've taken you through what this actually does, but what we don't know is how to match these so they don't grind. Because the rear wheel gears may be turning at a different speed than the engine gears.
Okay.
Okay? Now, before we go any further, let me add this also. If we look at this closely, we will see that half of each gear position is hooked to the engine and half of each gear position is hooked to the back wheels. Okay? This is half of first, that's an engine gear. Okay? Half of second, hooked to the engine. Half of third, hooked to the engine. Half of fourth, hooked to the engine. And half of fifth, hooked to the engine. Now, you have to look kind of close here in a minute, but half of first, this gear right here, turns with the rear wheels. Half of second turns with the rear wheels. And this little gear on the inside right here is the half of third that turns with the rear wheels. And this small gear right here is the half of fourth gear that turns with the rear wheels. And this little gear right here is the half of fifth gear that turns with the rear wheels. So now that we know that we can read half of each gear that we have in that transmission on the tachometer and the other half of it on the speedometer. So now we can take a method or a procedure, apply it to that vehicle, and find out exactly how fast these are turning at any given time so we can match them. Does that make some sense?
It makes sense.
To you? Okay. Now, how we do that, I'm going to walk you through verbally what we will be doing on the bus. Okay?
All right.
And then I have a little graph here, and I'll have you follow it and fill out the graph that you have. All right? So we'll get in the bus, we'll put it in first gear, let the clutch out, and we'll start off. Now, on your tachometer, we'll have a top RPM setting we will use. All right, in this case, it's going to be 2,000 RPMs. All right? So we'll put it in first gear, take the engine up to 2,000 RPMs, and hold it there, and we'll look at the speedometer to see how fast we're going. We find that it's 10 miles an hour. At that point, we will put a dot on our graph right here at 10 miles an hour at 2,000 RPMs. Now, what that is telling us this is doing is this gear is turning at 2,000 RPMs and this gear is turning at 10 miles an hour. Okay, now all of the rear wheel gears all turn together. Okay. Now, once we have established those points, we shift the bus, or we take it out of first gear and we put it in second. Now, I don't know how fast this is turning yet, or this gear, but I need to find that out. Well, I do too know how fast this one's turning because it turns the same speed as this one. So if I return the bus speed to 10 miles an hour in second gear, hold it steady, and look at the RPM, it will tell me how fast this gear is turning. And in this case, it's 1,000 RPM, so we put a dot there on the graph. And then we repeat that process all the way up through fifth. Take it up to the top of second, 2,000 RPMs, find out how fast you're going, 2,300, or 23 miles an hour, I'm sorry. put a dot on your graph at 2,000 RPM, 23 miles an hour. What's going on here is this gear is turning at 2,000 RPMs, this gear is turning at 23 miles an hour. All right? Now, we want to shift to third to set up our next shift point. So we're now in third. We return this gear to 23 miles an hour and hold it steady. Then we look at the tach and see how fast this gear is turning. We find that it's 1,300 RPMs. So we put a dot here at 1,300 RPMs at 23 miles an hour, which is the bottom of third. That's the shift point into third gear from second. Then you take your RPM up to 2,000 again for the top of third. You look at your speedometer, you find you're running 34 miles an hour, so you put a dot at 2,000 RPMs, 34 miles an hour. That's the top speed in RPM in third gear. Now what's occurring here is this is your engine gear, and it's running 2,000 RPMs, and your wheel gear is running at 34 miles an hour, okay? So now we can take it out of third gear and shift to fourth. All right, now we return the road gear to 34 miles an hour, hold it steady, look at the tachometer, and we find that the engine gear is turning at 1,500 RPMs. Okay? Right here. We took it up to 2,000. We established our 34 miles an hour. We shifted to fourth, reestablished 34 miles an hour, and found that it's turning 1,500 RPMs. So we put a dot there. Right? Then you take fourth up to 2,000 RPMs, hold it steady, take a speed reading, which is 45 miles an hour, and put a dot on your graph at 45 miles an hour at 2,000 RPMs. Okay? Then we take it out of fourth gear and shift to fifth, returning the road gear or the road speed of the bus to 45 miles an hour, then looking at our tachometer to see how fast the engine gear is turning, which again is at 1,500 RPMs, and we put a dot there at 45 miles an hour. That's our shift point into fifth gear. Now we have them all set, okay? There's some things we can learn from that. These are all your upshift points. From first to second at 10 miles an hour, you shift at 1,000 RPMs. From second to third at 23 miles an hour, you shift at 1,300 RPMs. From third to fourth, at 34 miles an hour, you shift into fourth at 1,500 RPMs. From 45 miles an hour, you shift from fourth to fifth, or you go into fifth at 1,500 RPMs. So those bottom dots are your upshift tachometer points, okay? Now we also have some downshift points here, but we really haven't talked about that, have we? Because we have to match gears going down as well as up, or they're going to grind, all right? These are all your top RPM points, but they're also the downshift points at the top of the gear range. Meaning if I'm in fifth, for example, and I want to downshift to fourth, I slow the bus speed down to 45 miles an hour, take it out of gear, raise the RPM to 2,000 RPMs, and I can put it in fourth gear. Same at 34 miles an hour, at 2,000 RPMs, I can put it in third gear. At 23 miles an hour, at 2,000 RPMs, I can put it in second gear. And at 10 miles an hour, at 2,000 RPMs, I can put it in first gear. Also, these bottom dots, as well as being upshift points, are also downshift points at the bottom of a gear range. For example, if I'm in fifth gear and I slow down to 34 miles an hour, I have a choice of either raising the RPM to 2,000 RPMs and going into the top of third, or raising them to 1,500 and going into the bottom of fourth. That's a bottom of a gear range. At 23 miles an hour, I can go into the top of second at 2,000 RPMs, or I can go into the bottom of third at 1,300 at that speed. At 10 miles an hour, I can go to the top of first at 2,000 RPMs, or the bottom of second at 1,000 RPMs at the same speed. Yeah, you can also skip a gear if you'd like. If you're in fifth, slow down, you want to go into second, all you have to do is set the speedometer at 23 miles an hour, take it out of fifth gear, raise the RPM to 2,000 RPMs, and go directly to second from fifth. It's not necessary that you downshift in progression. So what we've just shown you is if you shift at 2,000 RPMs at the top speed, you're shifting down at the top of the gear range. If you shift at the bottom dots for the appropriate gear at the appropriate miles per hour, you're shifting at the bottom of the gear range. Right? Mm-hmm. Now, there'll be times, John, and we'll show you this on the bus, that you may want to make a shift in between that somewhere. Like, let's say the gear range for second gear is 10 to 23 miles an hour. Okay? It's in this part right here, and this is your second gear line. Let's say we wanted to make a downshift to second at 15 miles an hour. Okay? On this graph, I can figure out what the match is on the RPM and the speed by doing this. You take the 15 mile an hour line, just draw a dotted line up to the gear line, which is second, and across to the RPM line, and we have the RPM that we can put that bus in second gear at that speed. And we'll show you how to do that on the bus with the instruments also. You can do that for each mile an hour on that graph if you want to get very sophisticated. In actual driving, there's probably 3 or 4 of those mid-range shifts that you should remember or learn about the bus you drive. One into first at probably 5 miles an hour. You just go up to the first gear line and over to your RPM line. It looks to be about 1,100 RPMs. One into second, and maybe one into third at 25 miles an hour are probably the most common ones you'll use during your driving career. But after you learn this and become proficient with it, you can certainly find out others if you choose to and make them work for you. Now, John, this concludes this part of the lesson. We showed you the transmission, how it works, how the graph works. You know, in a later lesson, we will go out to the bus and actually put this in practice. We'll teach you how to use the instruments, actually how to shift the bus, find the shift points, do all of the upshifts and downshifts that we need to know as a driver, and you'll do very well. Do you have any questions about any of this?
No, not at this time. It appears very clear.
Okay. Morning, John.
Good morning.
Now, this morning we're going to work on the shifting lesson. We're going to learn how to match gears in a standard transmission. There are a couple things that we need to know about that. One is that we always do this kind of training in a controlled driving environment because you're going to be watching these gauges a lot. I'll help you watch the road, so you're not totally responsible for that part, okay?
All right.
I'll help you watch the road, and we'll be working at fairly slow speed to begin with. And also on this bus, I want to point out these other two gauges up here. You're not going to be using these, but in case you had a question about what those were, we've added these on this training bus so that if we have other students in the vehicle, they can watch what I'm telling you to do
Oh, okay.
on the gauges up on the overhead.
So I'm just concerned with these gauges on the dash.
You're going to be concerned with these on the dash. Now, John, do you remember the other day in the classroom when we worked with the cutaway transmission?
Yes.
And we talked about the engine gears and the back wheel gears and how those matched?
Yes.
All right. The procedure we're going to teach you today is how to find that using the instruments on the dash. All right. The tachometer is hooked to the engine set of gears, so we can read what they're doing on the tachometer. The speedometer is essentially hooked to the wheel set of gears, so we can read what they're doing on the speedometer. Now, we're going to do this in sections. Okay, section 1 will be learning how to find the correct shift points using those two instruments. Section 2 will be upshifting once we know what those shift points are. Right? Section 3 will be downshifting at the top of the gear range using the information that we have learned from this setup procedure or finding the shift points. Okay. And then number 4 will be downshifting at the bottom of a gear range using the same information. Number 5 will be skipping a gear, either downshifting, for example, from 4th to 2nd, either at the top of the gear range or the bottom of a gear range.
Okay.
Number 6 is establishing a mid-range shift point. Now what that is, you may want to downshift somewhere between the top and the bottom. So we have a method of finding out exactly where the gears are matched so that you can make that happen.
Okay.
Okay? Now, let's start the bus, and we'll go back to section 1 and start with that procedure. Okay, go ahead and put it in first gear. Release your brakes. And let the clutch out easy at dead throttle, and we'll start. Now, what we're going to be doing, John, is coordinating these two instruments and learning some things from them. All right, so we've established our top RPM is going to be 2,000 RPMs. So I want you to accelerate and raise the engine RPM to 2,000 and then hold it there steady. Now take the time you need to get the RPM where you want it. One thing that you don't want to do in this part is rush it. All right, once we have 2,000 RPMs, all right, you're setting on 2,000. What's your speedometer read?
10 miles per hour.
All right, that's the top RPM and top speed for first gear. All right, now we're going to make a shift to second push the clutch down, move the stick to neutral, let the clutch up, adjust the RPM to where we think it should be, push the clutch down, put it in gear, and let the clutch up. All right, we're at 2,000 RPMs, and we have our speed reading. Okay, you ready to take it out of gear? All right, let's take it out of gear. Now, we'll just kind of get it in second gear. Now, once it's in second gear, re-establish the top speed that we had in first, which was 10 miles an hour. And hold it steady at that speed.
Okay, 10 miles per hour.
You got 10 miles an hour. What's your tachometer read?
1,000 RPM.
1,000 RPMs. Okay, that's the match point when you make a shift from first to second. If the speed is at 10 miles an hour and the RPMs at 1,000 RPMs, second gear is matched perfectly.
Okay.
All right, now let's take it up to the top of second gear. So take your RPMs back up to 2,000 RPMs and hold it.
All right, 2,000 RPMs.
All right, now, how fast are we going?
We're going about 23 miles per hour.
Okay, 23 miles an hour, 2,000 RPMs, the top of second.
Okay.
So let's go ahead and shift to third. Okay, good. Now we got it in third. Return the best speed to 23 miles an hour and hold it steady.
Okay. 23.
Okay, and once you have it steady, then read the speed or tachometer, and it'll give us our shift point.
About 1,300 RPMs.
1,300 RPMs. Okay, good. Now we'll remember that. Now go ahead and take it back up to 2,000 RPMs, and we'll establish the top speed for third.
Okay. 2,000 RPM.
What's your speedometer read?
About 33 miles per hour.
33 miles an hour. That's the top speed for third gear at 2,000 RPMs.
All
Okay,
right.
let's go ahead and make a shift to fourth. Easy. All right, now return the best speed to 33 miles an hour and hold it steady.
Okay.
And what's your tachometer say?
1,500.
Okay, 1,500 is the shift point into fourth gear at 33 miles an hour.
Okay.
All right, now just cruise till we get over on the other side of the obstacles, and we'll go ahead and set up the top of fourth and the shift point into fifth. Okay, now John, take it up to 2,000 RPMs, which is the top of fourth.
All right, that's where I'm at.
Hold her steady and take a speedometer reading.
45 miles per hour.
45 miles an hour. That's the top speed in fourth at 2,000 RPMs. Now go ahead and shift to fifth. Easy. Now reset the speedometer at 45 miles an hour. After we get around this curve.
Okay, we're at 45 miles per hour.
Hold her steady and then look at your tachometer and see what it reads.
1,500 again.
Okay, that's the shift point into fifth at 45 miles an hour. Okay, now just pull over here and stop. Now, what we're going to do, John, is practice those shift points that we just set up.
All right.
Now, as you remember, when we were shifting, we didn't really know where to put it, okay, what the shift points were. But now we know. The top speed for first, 2,000 RPMs at 10 miles an
per
hour.
All right.
And the shift point into second was
1,300.
1,000 RPMs. and then the shift point, or top speed for second was,
23 miles per hour,
and the shift point into third was,
1,300 RPM.
okay, and so forth.
Okay.
So let's just practice those. So go ahead and put it in first. Now, before you start, you may not be able to hold your throttle or hold the tachometer exactly where you want it all the time. I mean, that takes some practice, and you'll get very good at that later. So if you miss it a little bit, that's okay. Just bring it back to the point, and then go ahead and make your shift.
All right.
Now, John, we're going to release the clutch with dead throttle. We're going to use throttle control during this shift, and that will allow us to match the engine gears with the back wheel gears, but you can only do that with the clutch up in neutral. Now we're going to take it up to 2,000 RPMs, push the clutch in, make a shift to neutral, let the clutch out, adjust our RPM setting to the shift point, push the clutch down, shift in next gear, let the clutch out. And as you're going up, just practice your upshift points. All right, you're doing very well. Clutch up. Now try it. All right. Now just cruise till we get on the other side, John. And then we're going to start downshifting at the top of the gear range. Now, that simply means that we're going to take the setup procedure that we learned, the top speeds for each gear, and we're going to reverse that to use it so we know where the downshift points are. Okay, now for example, we're in fourth gear, the top speed of third is 33 miles an hour, is that what it was?
34.
34 miles an hour, okay. So what you do is you set the speedometer on 34 miles an hour, push the clutch down, take it out of fourth gear, put the transmission in neutral, raise the RPM to 2,000 RPMs, hold it steady, push the clutch down, downshift to third, and let the clutch out. All right.
So I'm at 34 miles per hour.
Okay, now just slide it out of fourth gear and raise the tachometer to 2,000 and hold it there. And put it in third. There you are. Perfect match, very smooth, everything's set. All right, now we can do the same thing at the top of second. What was the top speed for second?
23.
23 miles an hour. So slow it down to 23 miles an hour. And we'll take it out of gear, raise the RPMs to 2,000, hold it there, and we'll put it in second.
Okay.
Or downshift to second.
23 miles per hour. Right
Okay,
now.
now just slide it out of gear. Raise the RPM to 2,000, hold her steady, push the clutch in and shift it. See, they're all perfect matches. They go in, no grind, everything works like it's supposed to. Now, they've told us for a long time that you can't shift into first gear moving, but you can if those gears are matched. So what do we need to do to shift into first gear based on what you know now?
We have to reduce the speed to 10 miles per hour,
10 miles an hour.
slip it out of gear, and then bring the RPM back up to 2,000 RPM and shift into first.
Very good. Let's try that.
Okay, 10 miles per hour.
Okay, now let's slide it out of second gear. Raise the RPMs to 2,000. Pull it down into first gear. There you are. as long as you hold that RPM there and use correct throttle control, those matches will be very good on the gear. You'll have the clutch matched, everything will be smooth, just like you want it.
Right.
Okay, you're doing fine with that, John. Now let's move to the next part, and we'll do some downshifting at the bottom of the gear range. Okay, now, so go ahead and upshift from first to second, second to third, third to fourth.
Okay.
Get it to fourth gear, and then we'll start that process. All right, now we're going to downshift from fourth to third, except we're not going to do it at the top of the gear range. We're going to do it at the bottom.
Okay.
So at the speed that you went into third gear going up was 23 miles an hour.
Right.
And the RPM was 1,300 RPMs, right? That you went into third gear.
Right.
Okay, so we're in fourth. If we slow the bus down to 23 miles an hour and take it out of fourth gear, we can raise the RPMs to 1,300 at 23 miles an hour, and we'll have a match. And we'll be going into the bottom of third gear instead of the top of third gear.
Okay.
That makes sense?
Right.
All right. So hold her at 23 miles an hour.
Okay, 23 miles per hour.
Okay, now gently take it out of fourth gear. Easily raise your RPMs to 1,300 and make your shift. There you are. All right, now let's do a shift into second at the bottom of the range. So we use the bottom speed for second, which is 10 miles an hour. And the RPM that we went into second on the upshift was 1,000 RPM, right?
Right.
Okay, so that's the points we need. You got it right there. Now
10.
just slide it down to third. Gently roll it up to 1,000 RPMs and hold it and make your shift. Very, very good. Now go ahead and go around the curves here, and we'll get back over on the flat part of the track. And as you're driving, I'm going to explain to you what we're going to do in the next part.
All right.
All right. Now that you know how to effectively downshift at the top of the gear range and also at the bottom of the gear range, you may be in a situation, and more than likely you will be in your driving career, where you'll be in a higher gear and it won't be safe to shift down progressively. So you're going to have to skip a gear. So we're going to put it in fourth gear when you get leveled out over here. And we're going to make a downshift from fourth directly to second. Now we can do that either at the top of the range or the bottom of the range, just like we practiced, right? As long as you know what speed you want and the corresponding RPM, you can make that shift. So let's go ahead and get it in third gear, and then go ahead and shift to fourth. Good. Now go ahead and upshift to fourth. All right, now I'm going to show you two examples. The first example, let's go from fourth to second at the bottom of the gear range, which would be at 10 miles an hour. Your shift point into second would be 1,000 RPMs, right?
Right.
So just slow it down now. If you need to use your brake, you can do that. But slow it down to 10 miles an hour. And we'll take it out of fourth and put it directly into the bottom of second. Yeah, you may have to clutch it because we're getting close to idle here. So go ahead and slow it down. Okay, now just slide it out of fourth, raise it to 1,000 RPMs and hold it steady, and make your shift to second. There it is. See, as long as you know the setup procedure and you know the RPM and the mile per hour where these gears match, you can do anything with this transmission you want to do with it. Okay?
All right.
Now let's go to third, upshift to third, and we'll do a downshift from third to first at the top of the gear range. And all we need to know is the top speed for first gear, which was,
10 miles per hour.
and the top RPM for first gear, which was
2,000.
Okay, so let's slow the bus down to 10 miles an hour. And when you have it there, cruise it at that speed. Then we'll take it out of third gear, raise your RPMs to 2,000, and put it in first. Good shift. All right, now just slow down and cruise here for a minute. Now you've done very well so far on your setup procedure, on your upshifting, downshifting at the top of the range, downshifting at the bottom of the range, and skipping a gear. Now, let's spend some time practicing these items,
All right.
and we'll get a little more proficient in the process.
Okay.
Okay? Okay, John, now that you've practiced the previous steps and all the downshifting procedures, now we're going to teach you one more.
All right.
This one is something that drivers use a lot, and it's necessary that you know how to find this shift point, and it's called a mid-range shift point. You may find that sometime you want to shift into second gear and you're not at the bottom and you're not at the top. In fact, that's a real common one on right turns. The driver will make a shift into second in the middle of the range somewhere. Now there's a procedure to find out exactly what those shift points are, and that's what we're going to show you.
All right.
All right? So the first thing we need to do is put it in first. We're going to work with a mid-range shift for second gear.
All right.
So what we're going to do is get it in second gear. I'll show you the procedure. Then we will upshift to third, slow back down to the speed that we picked and the RPM we found, and execute that mid-range shift.
All right.
But in order to find the shift point, you have to be in that gear to find it.
All right.
And then we'll log that information and use it later.
Okay.
All right, so get it in second gear. Go ahead and nice, easy takeoff. You've been doing a good job, John. So just roll it on up, get it in second gear, and then we'll start this part. Okay, now, the range for second gear is 10 miles an hour bottom,
Right.
and 23 miles an hour top, right?
Correct.
All right, let's just pick a speed. Let's say 15 miles an hour
Okay.
is the speed that you're going to be running at when you want to make this shift. You're in second, so just raise it to 15 miles an hour and hold it steady.
Okay. 15 miles per hour.
Okay, you got it? What's your tachometer saying?
Says 1,300.
Okay. Second gear is together right now. right? We're in second and we're accelerating or running. So whatever that speed is and this RPM, that's a match,
Okay.
okay? So at 15 miles an hour at 1300, if we were in a gear above second, we could slow down to 15 miles an hour, raise the RPM to 1300 and put it in second gear.
Okay.
This is one of the easiest parts of the shift point lesson, is finding this mid-range. People make it a lot harder than it is. So when you get down on the flat over here, go ahead and upshift to third, and we'll slow down and make that shift. Up a little. All right, we're in third gear. Now slow the bus down to 15 miles an hour. And the shift point that we established was
1300 RPM.
1300 RPMs. Just cruise it at 15 miles an hour.
Did 15?
Now just take it out of third gear, gently raise it to 1300 RPMs and hold it steady and make a shift. There it is. Perfect match. Now let's do one more just to make sure we know how to do this, all right?
Okay.
So slow down and downshift to first. We're gonna set one up for first gear. So at 10 miles an hour, we can downshift at 2,000 RPMs, right? So go ahead and do that. All right, now we're in first gear.
Right.
Slow the bus down to 5 miles an hour. And 10 miles an hour was the top of first, right?
Right.
So 5 is about halfway. This is also a speed that you may be entering school driveways, for example, or some things where you don't want to stop to put it in first gear. We're going to show you how to set up a mid-range shift into first at 5 miles an hour so you can make that shift moving. All right?
Okay.
So we do the same thing. Simply set it on 5 miles an hour and hold it steady. Got it?
Okay. 5 miles per hour.
Okay, what's your tachometer set?
About 1,000 RPM.
Okay, now that's the match for first gear at that speed. Now go ahead and upshift to second, and then we'll slow back down and try that. Okay, now just slow it back down to 5 miles an hour. What was our shift point?
5 miles per hour and 1,000 RPM.
Okay, when we get it to 5 miles an hour, just gently slide it out a second. Raise your RPM to 1,000 RPMs and gently slide it into first. Just push the clutch in. Okay, we got it?
Got it.
Okay. Push the clutch in, slide it out a second, out, down. Now raise your RPM to 1,000 RPMs. Slide it right into first. You're moving. Okay?
Okay.
Now pull over to the side and stop for a second. Now does what we've covered so far make sense to you?
Yes, it does.
Okay. The one thing I want to point out at this point, then, we've done it on this bus. Well, we have, you may be working for an operation that has 5 different kinds of buses with standard transmissions. This method will work on any vehicle that has a working speedometer and a working tachometer. The numbers may be different, the speeds may be different, the RPMs may be different, but the method will work. So all you need to do, if later you work for an operation that has a different bus than this, you find out what the top RPM of that engine is. That's all you need to know, and go apply this method. You can find the exact shift points for that piece of equipment.
Larry, how do I keep track of the shifting points on the different buses I may be driving?
John, you remember when we did the classroom lesson and we explained the transmission, and remember the graph that I put on the board and we had you fill out?
Yes.
And also the shifting chart showed you how to log these shift points that we were working with today?
Yes.
I would suggest, if you go to work for an operation that has a mixed fleet, of making a shifting chart and a shifting graph on each bus in the fleet that has a standard transmission.
Okay.
And then put those in a notebook, and the trainer probably will have those same documents in a file in their office, but you put it in a notebook and then you can refer to when you need to. I want to caution you about one thing though. If a driver starts to rely on the shifting numbers written down on a piece of paper, and they're in a compromising situation in real life where they need to know what the shift point is right now, if they have to look at a piece of paper, it's too late. So I want to impress on you how important it is that you learn them. You learn the method, commit it to memory, so that if something happens, you can look at those instruments, make an instant decision on what has to be done, and do it.
Okay.
The graph and the chart are fine for figuring out other kinds of things, or maybe just refreshing a number you've forgotten. But learn the procedure. Don't rely on a piece of paper to do that.
All right.
Do you have any other questions, John?
None at this time.
Okay, you've done very well in these lessons. In the days to come, we'll spend some more time out here, and I want you to simply practice what we've learned today.
Okay.
Well, that's it. One method that can save the wear and tear on the drivetrain. It's not the only method, but it is one that will increase the life of your vehicle and help protect the lives of your passengers. By practicing this method, you are saving dollars. Remember to use what you know all the time.